gonna be brave, and we're gonna get out of this. Hey, let's go, come on. Get in.
Joel?
Denise, you get back inside the house! You lock your doors, now! Come on, get... Get your seatbelt on. Hold on.
Joining us now are the creators of HBO's The Last of Us, Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, along with Gabriel Luna, who plays Tommy. Welcome to FanFest, guys.
Great to be here.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Now, not to get too political right off the bat, but The Last of Us is all about mushrooms ruining everything, and I want to know what pizza topping would make for an even worse apocalypse.
I mean, pineapple, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, pineapple with ham is obviously the worst combination ever.
Oh my God, I love you.
Yeah, no, I'm from New York, so
yeah.
no.
Thank you. New Jersey. So
Look,
that makes me so happy.
I'm a pepperoni guy all the way, but last night I had a prosciutto and jalapeno, and it did have pineapples on it. Very few, but it did taste pretty good, man.
All right, so let's talk about that big, massive escape sequence in the first episode. It's The Last of Us game or show very much plays by like prison rules. You just kind of kick somebody's ass on the first day. Craig and Neil, can you kind of talk about what it was like adapting that from a physical, completely or virtual, completely CGI setup to making it physical and live action? And Gabriel, I guess, what it was like to actually be in a speeding truck going through a bomb to hell apocalypse in the making. Craig, let's start with you.
Well, my job was to try and recreate the feeling I had when I played the game. It wasn't so much about nailing all the specific things to make it look exactly the same, although the more we did it, the more we often did draw direct inspiration from the way the game looked. It was really about creating the feeling. But when it came to creating tension, that to me is as much about performance. So looking at how Tommy and Joel and Sarah interact with each other as a family within the context of this impending doom, and then how they behave under these extraordinary circumstances. It was exciting to watch, and all we really needed to do was try and instill people at home with the same terrifying feeling that I had the first time when I played the game.
What are we doing, Joe?
Neil, obviously, like this is something you've already done this once. This isn't your first rodeo, so to speak. What was it like, kind of adding to that and really building on that whole escape sequence?
Yeah, just remember a lot of brainstorming, outlining, and just saying what are the moments we want to keep. Where can we add something new? For example, the fake out with the car crash and the plane sequence, and then the big difference in execution from game versus live action is in the game, those elements are much more compartmentalized. They could be done more in isolation, and like you could finish a whole part, like all the animation, and then move on to something else. Here, you're working with all these different departments, so we would have months beforehand all these meetings of what should our infected look like, what are they wearing, how much do we show it, what kind of lighting do we want to have in this area. We were at Fort McLeod, where we took over a whole city block and transformed it into Texas, and then we said action, and just seeing like they're acting in that truck. There's a stunt driver on top of the truck that's driving it, and all the stunt people, the effects, everything is happening at once. So to be able to pull it off, it takes such a coordination of everybody. It was kind of incredible for me to watch.
And Gabriel, you've been involved in some gigantic productions before, but this felt just epic. There was an insane energy to the opening of this show. What was this like for you?
Yeah, no, as you mentioned, I've been involved in some large productions, and this one kind of topped them all in the sense that the everything was tangible. It was, you could see, smell, touch, taste, hear, everything was there. We spent a lot of time building these small stories, these little vignettes. I know Craig and Neil were just going mad trying to, not only having written this story, and that's with our protagonist, that we're following with our protagonist, but all of this multitude of other small stories being told.
We asked Bella and Pedro if they stole anything from set, and they both said no, although they could have been lying. But I want to extend the question to you guys. And no one's looking, no one's paying attention right now, so you won't get in trouble. But did any of you steal anything?
I did.
Oh,
but I did return it. But I stole Ellie's knife. And then the prop master contacted me. He's like, "Look, I'm gonna get in a lot of trouble. Please return it."
Give me my knife.
So I returned it, but he's gonna send it to me again. So I asked for two things. I asked for Joel's watch and Ellie's knife. So I'm still hopeful at some point I'm gonna get those.
now, one of the decisions in the show was to sort of switch out the spores, which made sense again with the gameplay. There was, gas masks and stuff like that for Tendrils, which as like a huge horror fan, I absolutely loved. Just visually, I'd like to hear about how that art direction kind of came together.
We're in a genre that there's so many stories out there that one of the smart things Craig said very early on that I immediately latched onto was like, what else can we do to separate ourselves? That we already have the clickers, and now they stand out because the way they have echolocation, how they look. But the more recently infected are closer to zombies. So what can we do that's different? So we had many, many brainstorms and conversations about what could the vector be? What's another way they could do than just biting someone? And that's where eventually we looked at some concept art, whether you see like some tendril-like things growing on people's skins, and came up with this concept of like, oh, it's not about them being violent necessarily. It's about them wanting to transfer the cordyceps from one host to another. And then the biting is about creating an opening where one didn't exist so they can insert these awful tendrils into you.
Yeah, this came out of also an early conversation that I had with a mycologist who is an expert on fungus. And what she was telling me was that there's something called mycelium. Those are these really thin filaments, these strands of fungus. And that is, in fact, what kind of goes through your veins, your circulatory system, and makes its way to your brain. And this is exactly how, for instance, cordyceps infects ants. And this was something that I don't think I'd ever seen before, at least not quite like this.
I found it to be a beautiful example of invisible VFX when you first see them. These filaments that Craig describes, the lighting, the way it hits it through the window, and the realism and the movement, and it was really exciting. It looked as physically real as something that subtle could.
Did any of you pick up any any survival tips or life hacks, whether for it's like an actual wilderness or just everyday life? Any like tips, any like around the house suggestions, Craig?
Oh, I mean, I always tell people that if this happens and there's a fungal pandemic sweeping through the United States, I'm done, guys. I don't even think I'll make it out of my house.
I had that exact experience, Craig, when Neil sent me the remake, the PS5 remake, and I quickly turned on the permadeath mode, and I was like, I've beaten this game before. I know where things are. I'm gonna go ahead and try it this way, and literally died, man. Got hung up on a fence when you're trying to run into the barn, and you're following Tommy into the barn right the last before the cutaway.
Yeah, do your best to become an Ellie and tell some good pun jokes and find your Joel, because otherwise I'm there's no surviving for me.
Nice. Now we got a question here from Swami MSN on Twitter. This is for Neil. Now that the show has arrived, do you think you need to write future Last of Us stories from both TV series and game perspective, or will you strictly stick to games? Are your future Last of Us stories impacted by this TV series? So that kind of really assuming you're making more Last of Us stuff right there. But
that is like a coded, is there Last of Us Part 3? No comment. I'll just say right now our focus is on we have the multiplayer game coming out, and we're going to reveal more of that later this year. Beyond that, it's the same process we've always had. We don't do something that we're not extremely passionate about. So unless we had a really good, compelling story to keep the story going, then it ends in part 2.
We didn't want to do gotcha journalism, so we thought we'd employ like a sacrificial fan and then try to no. Thank you all so much for joining us today. The show is fantastic. The audience loves it, and it's a huge hit. So congrats.
Thank you, guys. It was
Thanks,
great.
guys.
Thank you.